Welcome back to Live with AI Virtual CES 2022, a webcast series featuring exclusive interviews with industry experts and thought leaders on the topics of ADAS and autonomy, along with virtual demonstrations of AI's CES Innovation Award-winning Foresight LiDAR, a solid state and software-centric solution that adapts and optimizes its scan patterns in real time. These broadcasts are going to be played live across all of AI's social media channels. That includes Facebook and Twitter, as well as YouTube and LinkedIn. You can follow us there to get notified of the broadcast both today and tomorrow. And all of the interviews you see today with industry experts will be archived at a later date on AutoVision News. Joining us now this time around is Art Blanchford. He's a longtime industry veteran and former executive vice president at Veoneer. Now, Art is a high-performance business operations and sales strategist. He's skilled in consulting with leading Fortune 500 automotive clients on global manufacturing initiatives for a maximum return on investment. Art is a decisive leader and a proven change agent with a keen business acumen and competitive edge for effective turnaround leadership. He is described as a dynamic communicator, adept at delivering compelling presentations and conducting complex negotiations and mediations across multinational cultures. Here to discuss how different industries, businesses, and our daily lives can be improved through autonomous technology, Art Blanchford. And Art, welcome to the program this morning.
Thanks a lot, Carl. It's really good to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's always wonderful to visit with a fellow Detroit native. So I want to dive right in. I want to pick your brain, and I think the question on our viewers' mind is, in the next 1 to 3 years, we're at a brand new year here in 2022. So in the next 1 to 3 years, what are some of the biggest advancements that you see right now in ADAS and autonomy?
Yeah, I think it's a very exciting time in this
Yeah,
industry, as everybody knows. The macro trends of the whole industry with electrification and autonomy is coming quickly. But autonomy, I think you're going to see two things in the next 1 to 3 years that are really going to
sure.
change things a lot. One is you're going to see a huge propagation of ADAS systems, level 2 systems that make our daily lives so much better.
Right.
I drove, my wife has a new car with a great level 2 system in it, and I drove the other day 6 hours, and it's
Mhm.
halfway driving itself. I've got full attention on the road, but it's taking a lot of load. It's stopping and going with the traffic. It's centering itself in the lane, and it makes a
Yeah,
huge difference after 6 hours of driving. So you're going to see
sure.
that come across almost all new cars in the next couple of
Right.
years. So that's maybe not as exciting, but it's going to be a huge benefit to society. Take that workload off of people as they're driving. Secondly, my
Absolutely.
personal opinion, I think you're going to start to see a lot of fully autonomous delivery vehicles in a very geo-fenced area, right? And personally, I would love to see us focus on heavy and delivery trucks. There's a real shortage of labor right now for truck drivers, and you could make a big difference with getting full autonomy into limited areas that could really help with supply chain, help with workforce shortage, and make
Sure.
lives better for a lot of people.
Right.
So those are
Absolutely.
the two
So the
things that I'm really excited about in the next couple of years for autonomy and ADAS.
Yeah, you're right, and I've driven some of those newer vehicles with those ADAS systems that you're talking about, and when you do take a long trip, every year I go to visit family in South Dakota. That's like a 900-mile drive from here in Michigan. It's 13 hours on the road, so it does help reduce that stress. Absolutely. So I see similar things, Art, as well. So the next question is, if those are the trends, what is driving this? Is it the OEMs that want these requirements? Is it the customers? Is it the market in general? What's responsible for all of these advancements now?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above, right? A lot of
Sure.
times, even if you take about it from the market perspective, people often don't know what they are missing. They don't know what nobody thought about an iPhone until they had one.
Yeah.
If you had surveyed people,
Yeah.
they wouldn't say, "I want an iPhone," because they didn't even know what one was.
Right.
So I think
Right.
it is being pulled from the market. It's being pushed from technology leaders, startup tech companies, established automotive suppliers. It's being pulled and pushed by OEMs as well. I think everybody sees the great safety benefit and the comfort benefit. And really, those two go together. I spent a long time in auto leave, which is, our whole purpose was saving lives. But if you're
Sure.
also not fatigued on the road, because the car's doing more of the work, then that comfort makes you safer as well,
Yes.
right? So I think everybody sees the safety benefits. and that's driving it, and then the comfort benefits, and then of course, as we all know, anything that we can do right now to reduce the need for a workforce, because it's so hard to find workforce right now, and also to ease the supply chain is going to be good for everybody involved.
Of course, yeah. Art, the question here that I have, so regular cars, but you mentioned before heavy trucks, right? So let's shift gears a little bit. You know, does the implementation of autonomous technology make heavy trucks safer? Does that also relieve stress? And does it reduce fatigue on somebody who's working behind the wheel of a heavy truck? Does it apply as well?
Yeah, and I think the thing I'm excited about heavy trucks is, I think the biggest challenge for full autonomy is the infrastructure, right? And how do we make a safe infrastructure? Because to handle a level 5 where you can really drive anywhere in any place is going to be still
Mhm.
a long way away. But for heavy
Sure.
trucks, I've been driving a lot more in the last 12 months since the pandemic than I did before. It's usually on airplanes, and I've seen so
Right.
many near misses with heavy trucks where drivers are tired or they're not paying attention to the road. And
Right.
what we see with heavy trucks is, for example, the infrastructure part could be easy. If you take the hub lane and at
Okay.
night, instead of a high occupancy vehicle lane, you make it into a heavy truck only lane, autonomous heavy
Okay.
truck only. And there's
Okay.
technology available today where those trucks could come together in a train and follow
Hmm.
each other very close distance. The driver could actually, using the electronic logs, sleep in the back while it's on the interstate, drive through the night, and then when it gets to where it needs to go, the driver could take over and take it off the interstate and deliver the goods. So you
Right. Right.
increase the vehicle density on the road. You increase safety by having, in this space, fully autonomous, in this contained space, a level 4 system, and you reduce fuel economy by training all these trucks together,
Right.
where they're very close together, so you can reduce drag and save fuel economy 5 to 10%.
Right.
So there,
Absolutely.
and of course, you relieve the strain on the workforce as well, because you don't need as many drivers. You move the truck at night while while the driver can get some rest, and then come out into the cities in the morning. So I feel
Mhm.
like that could be. There's obviously some legislation that needs to be changed to be able to allow that to happen, but it
Sure.
seems within sight that could happen in the next few years, and it would have
Right.
so many benefits to society.
Now, Art, what you're referencing there, so all those trucks in the line, is that also called platooning? Sometimes you hear that term. Is that the same thing? Okay,
That's
so
correct. Yes.
that's the same thing. So we've got safety benefits. We've got fatigue benefits for the driver, obviously reducing the aerodynamic drag, fuel economy benefits. Now, as you had mentioned before, now supply chain. So the supply chain has been at the forefront of news headlines. It's been at the forefront of almost every discussion, the last 5 or 6 months. So here's a $64,000 question, I guess. But does the supply chain benefit now from autonomous trucks? Does the supply chain stand to benefit from this technology as well?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, obviously, there's the supply chain is very complicated and there's lots of factors, but one of those factors is having workforce to move the goods, right? Having workforce at the docks, having workforce, to drive the trucks. And this would relieve the workforce of having to drive the trucks. That portion of the supply chain would be improved by having autonomous vehicles. So I think
Right.
anywhere where there is a contained area that's a known route, where you could relieve, the need to have a driver in that time or that space, would allow those drivers to be used in more difficult spaces where they're needed, and therefore relieve that portion of the supply chain.
Right. So, kind of a two-part question here, Art. So, we've seen studies from organizations like PAVE, the Partners for Automated Vehicle Education in Washington, D.C., and various other consumer mobility reports that when consumers are surveyed, you know, they're overwhelmingly they feel pretty positive about autonomous vehicles, or they feel positive about infrastructure investments in their community, but they have a concern of safety. Safety always comes up. That's their number one concern. So it's a two-part question here. So the first part is, when you look at these surveys, why do you think that consumers still have safety as the number one concern? Even though they're interested in autonomous cars, they're still concerned about the safety. So that's part one, and then I'll go to part two after your answer here.
Sure. And I think the main reason people are concerned about safety in autonomous vehicles is basic human nature. We are always afraid of
Mm.
things that we don't understand completely,
Right.
right? So until we experience it completely, and And it's similar to if I take my wife and I, for example, if I'm in the driver's seat, I can drive fairly aggressively and I feel perfectly safe. But my
Yes.
wife might not be because she's not in control. And vice versa. If
Hmm.
she's in the driver's seat and she's driving exactly the same way as I was, I won't feel as safe as when I was driving because I am in control. And so I have this sense of control, even though it's not more safe, it feels more safe to us. So giving away that
Sure.
control is what I think people are worried about. I can tell you, if somebody's sitting in, a major urban area of traffic for an hour plus
Hmm.
a day, and the first time they don't have to be engaged with the car and they can let it go, they'll be really happy to have that
Yeah.
experience. I think there
Right.
is one, some part of uh, uh, it's still anecdotal, but it's fact based where people are fearing autonomous vehicles too. Is because anytime there's any mishap with an autonomous vehicle or partially, there are no fully autonomous vehicles on public roads independently yet,
Mhm.
but or partially autonomous vehicles, then it gets publicized a lot because it's a news story. And so you don't
Sure.
hear about, all 150,000 crashes we have in this country, but if it's an autonomous vehicle or semi-autonomous vehicle or Tesla that, runs into the barrier or something, then you
Yes.
you hear about it.
Yes.
And so people hear
Mhm.
about that. So I think those two things are why people are still a little apprehensive. And that's why I started at the beginning talking about the full proliferation of level two, I think is the main thing
Mhm.
that's going to solve that. As people start to learn to trust their cars and have this communication between their cars or like a partnership, that's going to alleviate that quite a bit. And we can get so much safety already at level two systems without having to go to level four. That's going to help a lot in society.
Right. So you kind of answered the second part a little bit, but for those of us, Art, like you and me, who are in the industry, what can we do? And anybody who's watching today, who's in the industry, who's working for an automotive company, what can we do in the industry to help reassure customers that the technology is safe, and that it will help and it will make driving less stressful and safer?
Well, I think one of the first things, and this is something I've seen in my 30 years in the industry, regardless of what
Sure.
area of technology I was in, is for those of
Sure.
us that understand it to share that with our friends and family that maybe don't understand it completely. Because even getting dealers, and you saw this even with airbags. There's a lot of questions about airbags and is there value for safety in airbags and anti-lock
Mhm.
brakes if you go back a little bit farther. So if we understand it well, to share that with their friends and family. Like my daughter just got her driver's license, my youngest, and
Okay.
she already doesn't want to drive my cars that don't have level two systems in them because she's so
Right.
used to the auto high beams doing for her and helping to stay centered in the lane or at least telling her when she's getting close to a lane marking, right?
Yes.
So she wants those because she understands them because I taught her about them as I was teaching her how to drive. So I think that's
Right.
one thing. And then of course, if we're in the industry, obviously keep working on bringing those forward and bringing costs down and getting them out in mass where they really are used and appreciated and making sure they're refined enough, the systems are refined enough where consumers enjoy them instead of wanting to push back, because there have been some systems where people turn them off because they seem they're
Right.
too intrusive. So obviously it's incumbent on us in the industry to make sure we make them refined enough and sophisticated enough that they cooperate well with the driver and don't create a backlash against the technology.
Of course. Switching gears here, Art, for just a little bit, not to use an automotive pun, but you've got some strong views on leadership, especially right now. You've talked about the labor shortage. There's a talent war going on, so you've got some strong views on leadership from your 3 decades in the automotive business. Can you share that with our viewers today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, and we're seeing this in the Great Resignation right now, that people are
Hmm.
people first, they're human beings first, and workers second. And as industry companies, what we always want more. That's the sort of the bottom
Yeah.
line, right? That's a bottom line for capitalism. We want more. We want more productivity. We want more efficiency. We want more profit,
Hmm.
right? We want more. And without checking on really the human side of what's really good for the workforce, then it gets to be where life is out of balance. I was that way for myself, and that's why I resigned
Hmm.
last year. Right, I'm part of the Great Resignation because I want to find a better balanced life. Right,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what? And the only thing that made me successful in the time I was in business is that for the people that worked for me, I treated them with a lot of honor and treated them as human beings from the very beginning and try
Yes.
to address the whole person and see the
Hmm.
opportunity business has to make their personal lives better, not just through a paycheck, but the way we interact and the way we can help each other and support each other to grow and become better human beings. And that was key. I mean, as one of my team members said one time, well, Art, you're not really that good. You just have a lot of good people around you.
Right.
And I said, well,
Right.
that's not by accident. But why do they
Yeah.
want to work for me? It's because I treat them in that way. So I've had for a long time, I've said happy employees makes a happy customer, makes a happy shareholder. But it starts
Right.
with the employee. And on top of
Right.
that, I mean, that's a basic fundamental in any industry, in any company. On top of that, people really want to do something that they themselves feel is purposeful, right? I
Right.
like that Irish playwright. He talks about the true joy in life is being used for a purpose or recognized by yourself as a mighty one.
Right.
So how do I want to use my life? What do I want to give my life to? And I think as in companies, in order to win the talent war, we need to think more about that, about what is it that really drives our company besides the bottom line. You got to have cash
Hmm.
to live. It's oxygen.
Sure.
That's clear. But besides the bottom line, what is it that we're really passionate about? What is our real purpose, our reason for being in this company? I mentioned Autoleave, where ours was about saving
Hmm.
lives, right? And that's something people could
Right.
really get behind. But what's our purpose? And do our employees line up with that purpose? Do they find that also meaningful? I think that's the only way we're going to, win the talent war as businesses. And it's a different and more long term and more integrated and balanced approach to how we deal with human resources.
Right. And, my hat's off certainly to AI for that. Working with this team here has just been fantastic. The executives, the communications team, the marketing team. So I feel, obviously AI has incredible technology, but the culture that surrounds that technology is just exactly what you have described. Art, in the
And if I
last
could,
couple of
if
minutes.
I could,
Yeah, go
if I
ahead.
could add one thing to that, because I think it's really
Yeah,
important. I did decided
please.
when I resigned, I decided I wasn't going to do anything else. But what I've written
Okay.
down for my next step in the future is the first
Yeah.
thing is hang out with really great people that help me grow.
Okay.
And so I met
Okay.
these guys at AI. I'm on their
Yeah.
advisory board, right?
Yes.
And I met them and I had such a good time with them. I mean, I really
Mhm.
enjoyed being together with them and I felt like I could help them grow. They can help me grow, not just in business, as a human being.
Yeah. Right.
And so that's the reason I've made one exception. I said I'll take on one small professional task in these next months, which is to be on the advisory board
Yes.
with AI because of that,
Yes.
because I really
Right.
like the guys that I'm working with.
Right. And when you talk about, your work having meaning, AI's work does have meaning because the LiDAR truly is unique. I mean, the idea of, perceiving like a human. And when you dig deeper into AI and you look at things like biomimicry, that is just the neatest thing. And then the aerospace and defense background. So, you get into AI and it's not just another LiDAR, right? So
Right.
you really do feel a sense of purpose in a crowded market with tons of other lidar providers, right? AI is unique in that, so you do feel that purpose, that sense of purpose. So Art, in the last couple of minutes that we have, I want to pick your brain one last thing here. So you've been in the automotive business about 30 years. You're doing a sabbatical now. You're transitioning. Over those 3 decades, what are some of, would you say, are the neatest things that you've seen, or what are some of the trends that you have seen come and go? Like what sticks out in your mind as most memorable?
Wow, that's a great question. And I think that what what's most memorable, because I'm driven so much by people, what's most
Yeah,
memorable, and this has nothing to do with megatrends in the automotive industry, is where
sure.
the I had the experience one time where I met a spouse of one of my employees for the first time,
Okay,
and I didn't
sure.
know who she was. And she gave me a hug and said, "Thanks for making our home better.
Hmm.
Since my husband has been
Yeah,
on your team, our home is so much better place, and I really appreciate that."
yeah,
And to me, that's a highlight for me personally. I mean, if I think about the industry, I think that the trend from going from a sort of very hierarchical industry, where you have the consumer, the OEM, supplier tier one, tier two, and there was a lot of, I'm going to say, false superiority based into that hierarchy,
sure, sure.
to a much more collaborative space where we're all working together at different
Hmm.
places in the industry.
Right, right.
Whether it's a startup tech company working with like AI, working with Continental, an established tier
Mhm.
one, working together
Right.
with an OEM that's really collaborative. It's very different. Or, in my other experiences working, with Qualcomm and GM and Veoneer all at the same time, right? In different spaces, but with full respect and full teamwork and cooperation, and the focus on relationships that you see from some of the executives like Mary Barra, that's really new in the
Yeah,
industry in
right.
my time. And to me, all the technology stuff is super exciting, and it's amazing where
Sure.
we're going with full electrification and full autonomy. It's very exciting and
Mhm.
very disruptive, and it's very exciting for me to see some of the old companies taking a lead in that space. And I
Yes.
think the human aspect of the way we work together to me is even more encouraging because it's very
Yeah.
different. I can tell you than when I started 30 years ago.
And what I'm taking away, Art, from our conversation is that, we can always build cars, but it's more important to build people.
And
So,
that's a great summary. And if you want to build the
yeah,
best cars, you have to first build the people.
I like that too. So these are excellent key takeaways. Art, um, I want to thank you for being part of the program today and for sharing your insights over 3 decades in automotive. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks a lot, Carl. It was a pleasure.
On the way, adaptive LiDAR and ITS systems. Is there a correlation, and can adaptive LiDAR help transportation authorities succeed? That and more is ahead, live with AI Virtual CES 2022.